serious? What are some places on Earth that are still unexplored because locals fear them, and what are they afraid of? In South Africa, there is a cave system known as the Cradle of Mankind because the most Australopithecus remains have been found there. People are allowed to go on guided tours of the caves. At the bottom of the main cave, there is an underground lake water system. The SAR government has banned any diving exploration of the lake. This is because, years ago, a group of divers became trapped and ran out of air. If anyone is interested, I'll upload some pictures of it. Edit. Imgur webpage. These were the only pics I could find on my hard drive. I never did get any good shots of the water though. I lived in the northern part of the Republic of Congo in a town called Mfundo. It was extremely remote, only accessible by boat or plane. There were many villages surrounding our city that were even more remote and only accessible by a dugout canoe. One of these places was Lake Tele. The locals would talk about an animal or monster called Mokelmbembe, in Lingala, the tribal language. It meant one who stops the flow of water. They basically thought it was a huge dinosaur that lived in the water there. They would describe it like we would a brontosaurus. They were terrified of where it lived because there were old legends that it would kill people with its size, and if anyone ate its meat it would kill the whole village. It was hard to explore that part of the country because people tended to avoid it. I've been fascinated by the Congo for a long time and really want to go. I tried to visit the Virungas 2 years ago but the visa didn't work out. I'd love to know more about your time there as I very much want to visit Lake Tele. I love rainforests. OMG. I read a book that was about it but it was fiction. Didn't know it was actually based on a real myth. Speed edit. It's Amazonia by James Rollins. There's also a book called Cryptid Hunters which has a plot centered on Lake Tele and Mokelmbembe. All throughout the world, wherever there are glaciers, there are crevasses. Massive ones. Ones nobody ever even knows exists because they are under snow. Ones that look like a small hole but open up into massive chasms you could never climb out of, etc. The fear, obviously, is never coming back out. An example of a really scary place full of them is near the base of Everest from the south side. The Khumbu Icefall. Wikipedia webpage. It's the start of massive glacier, and it moves fast enough that it's constantly changing. People actually do climb over the top of it as part of the primary route to climb Everest, but actually going down into the crevasses is something you absolutely avoid. And even if you did go down and explore one day, a few hours later everything could be very, very different. This is a local one to me. In Kent, UK, there are tunnels which supposedly run underneath the county town of Maidstone. People have found entrances and gone in, but they're usually too long, dark and flooded. Nobody knows quite why they're there. Rumors say they connect places that were important when they were built, including an old asylum that was demolished in recent years, where there was found an entrance to some tunnels. Additionally, there's an air raid shelter in the Maidstone Grammar School that hasn't been entered for many decades. The entrance is very thoroughly gated off, and old students say it was an entire underground school with multiple rooms, designed classrooms so that even in the event of an air raid, students could continue learning. There's even stories that behind the boards were secret rooms where the kids could hide if the Nazis sent a ground force into England. Kent is on the southern coast and near to London, so it'd be where the Nazis would logically land from France. Even if that doesn't make much sense, the shelter is off limits now and me and my friends spent all our years there trying to get in. But the school didn't want to accept responsibility for any kids getting hurt down there. The mysterious sealed temple door no one can open beyond Science TV webpage. The Padmanabhaswamy Temple. The last area cannot be opened. If so, something cataclysmic will happen too. Supposedly there's a shit ton of isolated snakes who've been breeding in the darkness for ages. Have fun with that. 3. The door doesn't seem to have a way to be opened, so there'd be some destruction. However, there's a benefit of this. The other temple rooms that have been opened, the riches have pretty much been siphoned off by family and government corruption. So the question is, who owns what amounts to a national treasure, a single family, or India as a country, and how best to protect that? The entire temple is carved from one massive stone. Can you imagine some religious sect taking an entire mountain away in today's time to carve a damn temple? People would lose their minds. Now this is the kind of thing they need to base a new Indiana Jones movie on. Not really unexplored, but in Japan there are many keyhole-shaped burial mounds. Wikipedia webpage men date back to the 3rd century, but with few exceptions the government won't allow excavation. I'm an archaeologist of coffin period Japan. In Japan right now actually, and the coffin are mostly off limits because no one wants to accept that the Japanese imperial family probably came from Korea in the 3rd through 6th centuries CE. They actually have people in little guardhouses by the biggest coffin all day, just to make sure no one climbs them. Japan is full of old people with nothing better to do than guard an archaeological site no one but weirdos like me even care about. The Catacombs under Paris. There are about 150 miles of maze-like tunnels under the city. Only a small portion gets toured by the public. People have ventured deep into them and would go missing for days. Oh, I remember a WTF thread ages ago where someone took photos of a trip they made in the catacombs. It was super creepy and I'm certain they said that they encountered some subterranean people within. Then there was something about catacomb parties or raves. Yeah, in 2004 police on a training exercise in the catacombs found a cinema with seats for 20 carved into the stone. A full bar, a lounge, the whole thing wired for phones and electricity and protected by a PA system playing guard dog sounds. They came back a couple days later and someone had stripped it all out and left a note that only said "Check has pass. Don't search, don't come looking." Edit. Here. Their Guardian webpage is a Graniad article on it if anyone wants a source. And then there was the 4chan post where a dude smuggled a skull out and put his dick in it. I've been to the public area of the catacombs, and it is spectacular. They were originally set up in the 1700s because of the crowding of the central cemetery becoming a hazard. So they used abandoned quarry tunnels snaking through the city. They stacked the remains from the cemetery dating back to the 15th century. There are a bunch of closed-off passageways, too. Humans have done some weird shit, but the catacombs are near the goddamn top, IMGA webpage, and we're too casual about it. I mean, the catacombs are just a logical solution to a problem. We are running out of places to dig holes to put dead people. What about that big hole that we dug for rocks? Pile all the fuckers in. But I agree, it's really strange in practice. It wasn't only a pile the fuckers in though. I was a put everyone's skulls here, their thigh bones here, their spines here, and while we're at it, how about we make some cool shapes out of these people's remains? Let's do a love heart made out of skulls here. That came later. In the beginning it was just piling in as many bodies they could find. It's a love heart IMGA webpage that creeped me the fuck out. They did a movie on this a few years back, As Above, So Below. Never watched it, but I remember being weirded out by the trailer. It's not unexplored per se, but the Plutonian at Hierapolis Wikipedia webpage. Emits toxic gas intense enough to kill most living things in moments, and was assumed to be a gate to the underworld, in a rather illuminating display of their culture, rather than avoiding the cave of painfully slow asphyxiation. The Romans turned it into a tourist attraction at which one could purchase a live animal to throw in or meet oracles of Pluto who had been through into the cave and lived. I'd really like to see that explored with scuba tanks or whatever. If people have been throwing stuff in that cave for thousands of years, there could be some pretty interesting artifacts preserved there. Humans in a nutshell, we think this might be a portal to hell. Let's throw stuff into it. We're no different today. If we found something we couldn't explain that appeared to be some type of strange portal to another dimension, we'd definitely be shoving shit into it. Just more scientifically. Imagine they get in there and all the old bones and artifacts are neatly arranged on shelves and display cabinets, with the under-people taking entrance fees to the cave of spontaneously appearing things. The ancient historian Strabo described the gate as follows: any animal that passes inside meets instant death. I threw in sparrows and they immediately breathed their last and fell. 4. I love that we have the writings of the Roman historian to inform us. Yeah, I chucked some sparrows in there and they totally died. That the theory about Delphi too. Supposedly the oracle at Delphi would inhale noxious gas from cracks in the rock and proceed to have visions which were probably seizures of some type. Most of the world's blue holes, Wikipedia webpage, are unexplored because they are fucking dangerous. They are deep underwater sinkholes, hundreds of feet deep. One is over 900 feet deep that generally have a toxic layer acid part of the way down. That video of the diver, his name was Yuri I think, dying, haunts me every time. Also the holes in the West Indies are said to be home of the mythical Lusca, which is an octopus with the head of a shark, and is also massive. There have also been disappearances of people getting dragged down into them, so there is something fun for all you thalassophobes out there. Octopus with the head of a shark, and is also massive. Till that, Sharktopus, in webpage, isn't just something a drunk guy working for the Sci-Fi channel made up. We have an assload of those around where I grew up. There's one really small one that you can walk out on a dock to the middle, and then there's the big one they closed to the public. I got to see the big one in 3rd grade because the guy who owns the property let us take a field trip there. It used to be a freshwater spring, and they used it to power a water wheel. The back pressure from damming the outflow up caused it to collapse and open up. They called it bottomless and used it as a tourist attraction. There's no natural oxygen for fish in it, so they used a water wheel to aerate the top and stock it with fish. People like to throw garbage and stuff in it because it was bottomless, so they closed it from the public. Really, it's only a couple hundred feet deep. All the ones in my area are essentially collapsed springs that are connected by underground waterways. They're still trippy to look into and not see the bottom. Just a long-ass tunnel filled with beautiful deep blue water. It's odd that the Wikipedia article doesn't mention how dangerous they are. There's a huge sinkhole behind my old house in Kentucky. Kentucky is absolutely full of caves. Anyways, it has a river flowing at the bottom and through a tunnel. So there's 2 cave entrances that nobody in my neighborhood had the balls to go into. My mom's friend visited one day, and she's a geologist, so she's huge into caves and wanted to see. I brought Get there to take a look. She basically glanced at it and was like, fuck no, we'll die if we go in there. The current is very strong, and the rock surrounding it looked very eroded to her. She said it's at high risk of collapsing, and the current would sweep us underground either way. I wish she had brought more of her tools and stuff. Supposedly she could have put in like a sonar buoy to see how far it goes. How close is it to Mammoth Caves? Remember reading that they keep finding spurs that connect to other cave systems. It's about 20 minutes by car. It isn't super close, but considering the size of Mammoth Cave, I wouldn't be surprised if they linked up. Yeah, Mammoth Cave has like 400 miles of caverns, so it's definitely possible that it's connected. Devil's Hole in Nevada. It also has endangered pupfish. Devil's Hole. Wikipedia webpage. I was just there back in April. Very cool spot. There's also a bunch of killer bees that like to hang out there, which is less cool. Recently, an ancient city was discovered in the vicinity in the forest area in Rio Platano, Honduras. Recently, because the cartels have such a big fucking hold over it, that it's simply impossible to go in there without dying or worse. So much history that could await along that river, not found because of drug lords. La Ciudad Blanca, I believe it was called. Great book written about its discoverer recently, and all the members of the exploration party, including the guy from the New Yorker writing about it, got incurable leishmaniasis, so that's awesome. The Lost City of the Monkey God by Doug Preston, awesome book. Highly recommend. This book cured any desire I might have ever had to mash around the jungles of Central America. People have been there several times, and are still alive. It's very possible. Just dangerous and difficult. Also, there were reports of a hideously deforming flesh-eating disease latent in the soil, which a bunch of the most recent explorers contracted. There was some speculation the city was originally suddenly abandoned because of a curse and the disease could have been it. They contracted leishmaniasis, a disease transferred by sandflies which can eat through the face. The parasite migrates to the mucous membranes of your mouth and your nose, and basically eats them away. Mr. Preston told CBS News, your nose falls off, your lips fall off, and eventually your face becomes a gigantic, open sore. It's just too dangerous. Getting in and out of the jungle is dangerous. Jungle explorers contract rare flesh-eating disease among ruins of ancient lost city of the Monkey God, the independent web page. The bottom of the Cave of the Crystals in Mexico. The cave is naturally so hot and filled with water most of the time, it can't be fully explored. But the pictures are gorgeous from when people did go in. Cave of the Crystals. Wikipedia webpage. This is a place where in order to explore it, the spelunkers had to wear refrigerated suits and could only go so far due to their suits overheating. It's like a journey to the center of the earth. That, and since your lungs are the coolest part of the area, the water condenses into your lungs. Not fun to have the air drown you, but Florida seems to do alright. Living in Florida, I can say I've experienced the amount of humidity in this cave. Yet it's over 130 degrees F in the cave and only 93 degrees F in Florida. The humidity is awful. I've been in 100 plus temperatures with much lower humidity, and I would take the higher temperature any day. I can only imagine the discomfort, pain that the high temp and humidity would cause without a suit. I live in Florida and it's awful. I go outside to work in my yard around 7:30 or 8 because I can't wait until later due to the intense heat. Even at 7:30 it's extremely humid. Standing outside for 15 minutes and I'm soaked from head to toe. You joke, but we've evolved gills down here in Florida. We only lung breath in like February. Oh. I saw a documentary on this a few years ago. It's crazy. So the temperatures are rated at 136 degree F, 58 degree C. It's so hot and humid, 90-99% humidity, that the maximum amount of time that can be spent in there is 10 minutes, if you're lucky or really dumb. In order to explore it, some scientists drained the caves of the hot sulfate water, and went in wearing refrigerated suits specifically invented for these caves. Although it changed the amount of time they could be in there, it was only increased by 30-40 minutes. Thankfully this was just enough time to complete a bit of research. It was rather dangerous anyway, because it was slippery and precarious. At the end of their research trip, the scientists returned the sulfate water to the caves. Apparently gypsum crystals only grow when they're saturated by hot sulfate water. It was a fascinating documentary. I highly suggest watching it. Hades Gate, or the Gate to Hell in Denizli, Turkey. Supposedly, there's so much carbon dioxide coming out of the entrance of the ancient site that anything that gets close to it dies from asphyxiation. Scientists have determined, because this cave sits along a fault line, that the carbon dioxide filled it from an opening in the Earth's crust. The Anidi Massif in northern Chad comes to mind. There are desert tribes that use the wadis, which are among the busiest in the Sahara, and ancient peoples live there. But there are hundreds of thousands of miles of labyrinth that are probably pretty unexplored, and few others but the desert people see any of it. There are several reasons. It's in the Sahara and difficult to get to in the best of times, requiring a well-equipped expedition to make it there purely because of geography. Politically it's a dangerous place right now too, and various militia and terrorist groups are likely to be hiding there, as well as some desert raiders. I have tried to convince locals to take me but all refuse. The Anidi Massif, UNESCO World Heritage Site Explore Chad webpage. The Anidi Plateau, Secret Stones of the Sahara Curiositas webpage. Perhaps my favorite, and that is closest to me, is the former nuclear jet testing labs in the Dawsonville Forest in Georgia. They are abandoned now. Some people have explored there, but back in the 50s, there was naked nuclear testing, no protection barrier, which means there is concern for high levels of residual radiation. That said, the bunkers still exist, rumored to be complete with furniture and other things untouched since it was abandoned. Georgia Nuclear Aircraft Laboratory, Dawsonville, Georgia. Atlas Obscura webpage. There's an area in Tibet called the Tsangpo Gorge that allegedly has a massive hidden waterfall that only appears to people who have reached nirvana. Last I checked, the Chinese don't allow people to explore the area much, but that may have changed by now. There's a book about it written by a guy named Ian Baker who did 2 expeditions into the gorge. Tibetan Buddhism has other similar places called Beal, Wikipedia webpage, which are hidden valleys. Shambhala, Wikipedia webpage, is believed to be one of these hidden places. The idea is really interesting, a place that borders physical and spiritual worlds. It is said that some of these places contain primitive cities. Think Amazon tribes who have never seen modern society, that are in a near-utopia state. No wars, fighting, everyone is blissful, etc. Shangri-La is the fictional creation of Shambhala. No thanks. If Uncharted 2 taught me anything, there's going to be these giant mutated people who feed on the sap of the Chintamani tree, and they're in anything but a utopia. If the Uncharted series taught anybody anything, it's that you stick to main tourist attractions and don't go anywhere that wasn't listed on a free cheap map. Just reading the posts in this thread makes it clear that China has a lot of cool shit banned. The Nahanni National Park in northwest Canada, also known as the Valley of Headless Men. There are no roads leading in and it is only accessible by boat or plane. Ancient tribes of the Nahanni Valley were afraid to settle within the region as they believed it to be an evil, haunted place inhabited by various spirits, specters, and devils. In the 18th century, Europeans began arriving to the area looking for gold. In 1908, two brothers Willie and Frank MacLeod pushed farther into the valley looking for gold and disappeared only to turn up beheaded. More beheadings and mysterious deaths began occurring over the years. In 1945, a trapper appeared to have been flash frozen despite evidence of having a fire going and clutching a pack of matches. Many others just simply vanished, never to be found. Around 44 people had vanished under unknown mysterious circumstances by 1969. To this day there's no answer to what was responsible for the beheadings or the disappearances. The area is so forbidding and remote that very few people other than adventurous rafters ever attempt to explore it. Despite being a national park, Nahanni Valley is almost completely unexplored. Edit. Other known beheadings were a prospector named Martin Jorgensen whose cabin burned down in 1917 and his skeleton was recovered from the ashes with no sign of his skull. And in 1945, a miner from Ontario was found dead in his sleeping bag with his head missing. Edit. I tried looking more into where Martin Jorgensen is from and almost everything I found all had him listed as Swiss, with one place listing him as Norwegian, so I'll remove calling him Swiss until I find a conclusive answer. I promise I was just going off the reading I had done and wasn't just making my own assumptions. I mean, there's no gold, no infrastructure, and no easy way for tourists to get there, so there isn't really much reason for any but the most hardcore of nature enthusiasts to go there. It's also pretty cold 9 months a year. It is apparently a pretty spectacular trip down the river though. No real reason people can't go there besides that it is a bit of work to get there and you are basically on your own for the whole way down the river. I believe Parks Canada sets a quota for how many people can do the trip in a season as well. Besides the river, it would be pretty difficult to get around in the rest of the park. No roads, obviously, or trails, and I'm not sure you would see much that you couldn't see in more accessible places in the NWT. Hiking around in there would require a chartered helicopter or float plane and a landing permit, which may not be easy to get. A travel photographer I follow goes there once a year. He claims it is some of the most beautiful scenery he's seen anywhere in the world. His pictures from there look amazing. Unknown mysterious circumstances. Read The Canadian Winter. But seriously, I had no idea, rethinking my desire to visit someday. Do you have any sources for this stuff? I'd love to read more. It's all sensationalized. It's an extremely remote area, so it's naturally hard to get to. A fake. Only 2 headless corpses were found, and a few other deaths occurred back in gold rush days, and the 44 missing since 1969 isn't substantiated. The park has been visited by Pierre Trudeau, is a very well-known river trip destination, and is in fact so well regarded that it was voted as one of the 7 wonders of Canada. It's not some ancient cursed land. I hope to visit it one day. Sensationalized or not, I feel like 2 headless corpses being found is still too many. To give a sense of scale for any Europeans, Nahanni National Park is the size of Belgium, 30,050 km. To give a sense of scale for any Americans, Belgium is the size of Maryland. From Wikipedia, Jean-Pierre discovered more than 250 caverns. The most important contained 116 Dal sheep skeletons. Carbon 14 dated to 2,500 years BC. That's pretty freaky. That would certainly be a freaky sight to walk into in a cave. Although sheep are some of the dumbest animals on the planet, so I would assume sheep shenanigans got them in there in the first place. Although I personally can't tell a sheep skeleton from the next animal, so I'd be freaked out regardless. There could have been a hole from the surface at one point that they may have stepped into while grazing, or other entrance that they wandered into and couldn't find a way back out. I have been fortunate enough to have canoed the river from Rabbit Kettle Lake down. It is likely the most beautiful place I will ever see in my life. I guess one native tribe did the smart thing and killed everyone who came. That's exactly what I was thinking. What if there are still natives living there? If it's so remote and if they maintain a primitive lifestyle and have low numbers, their presence could easily have been ignored for centuries. Of course there are natives there. Only humans behead humans. Granted, disease or whatever could have wiped them out in recent decades. The inside of Australia's Black Mountain, Korkajika National Park, Wikipedia webpage. This thing is pretty much just a giant pile of boulders with massive internal caves that can't be mapped. To my understanding they can change over time as well due to collapses. People go in and never return. Makes the Death Mountain nickname more sensible. Edit. So apparently it's not called Death Mountain anywhere. Likely just a single Wikipedia edit. And yes, stuff in Australia wants to kill. I think that's a given. I used to live near there. The mountain whistles and moans in the wind and it's always windy there. Like if you blow over a bottle jug. The people with properties near the mountain don't get TV radio signal and report weird gremlins in their electronics. As a local, no one has ever called it Death Mountain, and I worked at the local pub, so I've heard many a tall story about Black Mountain. The best one, supported by more than a few locals, is about a panther tiger big cat type thing that is living there. Depending on who you talk to, it's either an isolated or small breeding colony, large escaped zoo circus cat, or there's a population of thylacine in there. A hidden population of thylacine in Black Mountain is now my favorite fringe theory. Heck, the Wikipedia article also suggests there are subterranean people living far below the mountain. That would also be crazy. The Death Mountain thing was just something noted here and there while I was quickly refreshing myself on this subject matter. Although it whistling and moaning is something I haven't heard before. That just takes it up a whole other level. Why can't someone just, like, send Robertson or something? Is that too expensive, not worth it? I'd imagine the signal would get blocked eventually. It's a bunch of solid rock. Could run a wire. But there's still a risk of random collapse. That, and it's Australia. The wildlife is still a factor and God knows what's in there. It is believed that those who vanished most probably fell into one of the chasms under the rocks, or after entering one of these places became lost. It is estimated only 3 in 10 would survive such falls, wandering below the Earth's surface with only groundwater streams and insects to nourish them. This minority group are referred to by tourists as outback moles. Is there a group of subterranean Australian mole people? Bottomless lakes in New Mexico are what they sound like. Some of the small lakes have no bottom and feed underground rivers and streams stretching hundreds, possibly thousands of miles. Trackers have been tossed in and found days later in the Gulf of Mexico. They have claimed many lives of careless swimmers, and the dangerous lakes are now sealed off. I swam in the safe ones nearby but always felt kinda creeped out. Yup, had a friend swimming on the lake near Angelfire NM and locals came out screaming to get him to come out to the lake having dangerous holes. This sounds like it. We were there about a month ago. It was the second night of our vacation and we were camping there. drove into the park and passed a bunch of emergency vehicles parked next to one of the lakes with a bunch of cops and other guys standing around the cliffs looking into the water, and another in the process of putting on a diving suit. We knew someone had drowned. Kind of put a damper on the beginning of our trip. Then a few days later we missed the rock fall in the Narrows at Zion by 20 minutes. Edit. Link to story about guy who died at bottomless lakes. Redirect notice web page. And the rock fall at Zion. Rock fall injures 2 hikers. Closes trail at Zion National Park. The Seattle Times web page. Who the fuck thinks it's a good idea to jump 200 feet? It hurts jumping 20 feet if you are stupid and inexperienced like me. The guy who thought the only thing that kills people is the rocks or surface underwater. So bottomless lake means all water and green light, I guess. Note: the lakes are only 90 feet deep at most, and though the underground rivers are hundreds of miles long, they aren't necessarily hollow, continuous caves, and are usually just water flowing through dirt. Also, the Gulf of Mexico thing sounds like an urban legend, and I haven't found anything to substantiate it. Huska Castle was built to cover up the opening to hell, a seemingly bottomless pit from which the demons of hell would crawl out at night to wreak havoc. Located in the Czech countryside, before the castle was built to seal this entrance to hell, prisoners who had been condemned to death were thrown in. Scary shit, my dudes. Not thrown in, but rather lowered down by a rope. The prisoners would do this in exchange for a pardon. There's this one legend where a prisoner went in for a pardon. While he was being lowered down, he screamed so horrendous that the guards raised him up, only to find out he had aged a lot. Like to the point that he was graying. He died a few days later, I think. Sounds like volcanic outgassing creating pockets of acidic vapor, or a sinkhole created by groundwater contamination of a sulfur-rich mineral deposit for the same effect. Wonder if some scientists have ever mapped the underground structure. If the folklore holds true, and slapping a building over it seems like a great way to stop the atmospheric outgassing and allow the local area to revegetate. Given the carcinogenic effects stated in folklore and its effect on local wildlife, it reminds me of stories from the 1800s of areas with oil deposits bubbling through to the surface, or an underground coal fire. Okay, I looked this up and found this article. The Huska Castle Bottomless Pit, Real Paranormal Experiences webpage, which says this. During the war, the Nazis opted to use the fortress as a secret headquarters. To this day, locals believe they picked this location in an attempt to harness the dark powers contained within the building. Can you actually imagine what Nazi dark magic would look like? Rudolf Hess, who was deputy Führer, second in command, was bad fucking shit crazy and really into magic, with a K. Magic. He was probably the source of all the crazy shit in popular culture nowadays about Nazi craziness, like Indiana Jones and trying to find old spears and holy grails and all that. Hess is the dude who one night in the middle of WW2 took a Nazi plane, flew from Germany to Scotland solo, could not find an airfield in Scotland, so he ditched his plane as it was running out of gas and parachuted to the earth. He had never, ever parachuted before, not even as a training exercise. Landed in a farmer's field and asked for a regional lord, because he assumed a local aristocrat would have some pull with the British military, as if it were feudalism, and basically asked politely for Britain to not invade and destroy Germany. The farmer, of course, gave Hess a cup of tea while waiting for him to be arrested. British as fuck. It would look like necromancy, in a very real way. Their war effort was powered by death in the form of slave labor. During World War II, the Germans used the castle to perform inhumane experiments on local people or prisoners of war. Just a happy legacy. That's pretty wicked. Imagine the alleged SS Paranormal Division occupying a castle built to cover the gates to hell. Sounds like the setup to Doom Wolfenstein crossover. That's badass. I'm traveling to the Czech Republic next spring. I didn't know about this place. I'll have to check it out. The Inyanga Mountains in Zimbabwe. The myth is that if you climb this mountain and make nasty derogatory comments about the vegetation or rocks or anything you see there, for example you pick a fruit and comment on how bitter it tastes, you'll disappear forever. It sounds ridiculous until you learn that several people, including tourists, have disappeared in that mountain. Extensive manhunts and helicopter searches failed to find a single person, dead or alive. Locals fear the mountain, but tourists take it as a challenge, but doesn't end up good for a lot of them. The most recent case was Zaid Dada. Vanishings and high strangeness at Africa's Cursed Mountain Mysterious Universe webpage. It gets covered in impenetrable mist, frequently gets down to freezing temperatures especially at night, can be pretty treacherous underfoot, and has leopards and baboon spiders. I don't think it's particularly mystical, just a rubbish place to get lost in. Kolotsayakhl in Siberia. The name means dead mountain in Mansi, the language of the local tribe there. It's also where the infamous Dyatlov Pass incident took place. The Yauta Polimino has a great video on the Dyatlov Pass case if anyone is interested. You just made the name of the game make sense to me. It's called Kolot and it's about the Dyatlov Pass incident. Is there a TLDR on Dyatlov Pass? Sounds interesting but it is also late. Bunch of people went on ski expedition and didn't come back. When they found their bodies, they were in very weird positions, places with varying amounts of clothes despite the freezing temperature. I did a research project on this. Some of the bodies were burned. One with trauma the likes of getting hit by a car. One's tongue was cut out. Others' hands were mutilated in an attempt to climb a tree. Some bodies had traces of radiation. The tent was cut open from the inside, and the only survivor left the party early due to an onset illness. Fun stuff. Padmanabhaswamy Temple in Kerala, India. There are 6 underground vaults labeled Ataf in the temple, out of which 5 have been opened. From these 5 vaults, about a ton of gold and form of jewelry, coins and utensils has been found, apart from diamond and other precious stones necklaces stretching 9 feet long. But the real mystery lies in the vault B, which is yet to be opened. There's a warning on the door written in Sanskrit that curse and calamity will befall on anyone who tries to open the door. The door is said to have been sealed with Nagabandham or the snake seal by a Siddha Purush, aka a very powerful sage who has realized the true potential that a human can achieve through spiritual disciplines such as meditation. A Siddha Purush is like a living god, and only a Siddha Purush can open this vault again using the Garuda mantra. Any other human being who tries to open the vault will fail and feel the wrath of the 7-headed serpent that guards the vault. This 7-headed serpent is one of the primal beings of creation and servant of the creator of the universe, God Vishnu. You're the 4th person to mention this but the only one to give real details. Thank you. When I was teaching in Saudi Arabia, locals refused to take me to Madain Saleh, Wikimedia webpage. It's very similar to Petra in Jordan, built by the same people. Unfortunately it is known to be cursed by jinn. Muslims won't go there. Really annoying. BC my Arabic wasn't near good enough to get me there alone. I've actually been there. You are not allowed to eat or drink in the area or stay after dark. There is an old Ottoman rail station there too. The tomb of the Chinese Emperor, Qin Shi Huangdi. Although we have seen images of his famous terracotta warriors, nobody has ever entered the tomb. Since he was the most tyrannical and violent leader in Chinese history, and because he was so powerful, there is a lot of superstition about his evil spirit and other crazy things about it. Not to mention, there is rumor of a lake of mercury within the tomb, so it could prove dangerous to open at all. The Chinese government is not allowing the tomb to be opened and zealously restricts people from having access to the land surrounding the tomb. Just interesting. I would really like to know what's inside TBH. Edit. People are mentioning Ma being way more tyrannical. I know he was horrible, but I was under the impression that although Mao killed more people, that was partially due to the length of his reign versus that of Qin. And also that Qin employed a lot more brutal tactics, unlike Mao's extreme communism. Pulling from Wikipedia, anomalously high levels of mercury in the area of the tomb mound have been detected, which gives credence to the Sima Qian's account that mercury was used to simulate waterways and the seas in the mausoleum of the first Qin emperor. However, some scholars believe that if the underground palace is excavated, the mercury would quickly volatilize. That is, the remaining mercury, if it was indeed present in such large quantities, then would quite literally get everywhere if they excavated the space. How did they obtain such large amounts of mercury with their technology? Mercury has been known since antiquity. It's not rare at all and pretty easy to process from cinnabar ore. A large part of why they haven't opened it yet is lack of proper preservation techniques. When they were excavating the terracotta warriors, a lot of them actually had paint. However, that paint quickly vaporized, and there's currently no solution for what to do about that. That's why not only have they not excavated the main tomb, but also have stopped excavating the terracotta warriors. I always wondered if they could drill a small hole in the ceiling of the main chamber to insert a borescope, if it would be enough to cause any serious damage to the contents in the chamber. Granted, there would be a chance of ruining some art on the ceilings. The problem is that the main chamber probably doesn't exist anymore as a chamber but as a collapsed heap of rubble under the burial mound. So anything that's down there is probably soaked in water and preserved mainly due to the lack of oxygen. They dug up one emperor's tomb near Beijing in the 50 IES, and the biggest problem they had was the preservation of the artifacts uncovered. They found silks, wooden artifacts and so on, and a lot of them were destroyed simply due to exposure to the air, and what was left was destroyed in the Cultural Revolution. Fun fact: the famous Greek statues we all know and love were also painted at one point, as chemical analyses reveal. Some museums have restored the paint, and quickly received backlash because the statues are supposed to be white like marble. This is only a replica, but they probably looked like this. Whoops. Something is wrong here. Ancient Origins webpage. When they were sculpted. China has countless pyramids too that are similar to that tomb and aren't open to the public, and there is little information about them in history. Oh man, I'm interested in reading more about this now. Didn't know they had pyramids. Yeah, they are earthen pyramids, so not like Giza, but cool nonetheless. I believe they are still doing testing of the site, and soil sample confirmed a crazy high mercury concentration. It is indeed heavily restricted who can enter, though. It's also because we haven't figured out a way from preserving the relics from oxidization. Because the terracotta armor, for example, used to have a layer of paint on it prior to excavation and didn't last very long outside before falling off. The Darin Gap, a 100-mile gap in the Pan America Highway, covering terrain that includes Panama and Colombia, but is effectively governed by neither. Most of it is marshland and with virtually no infrastructure it is a wet cesspool of tropical disease and, historically, paramilitary groups. People do live in it, in certain regions, and migrants traverse its more worn paths out of desperation. But it's virtually guaranteed to claim the lives of the careless. There is nothing of civilization or man's law there. Darien was Scotland's first and only attempt at an overseas colony. It was a colossal venture that attracted massive investment from the public. And it was such a disaster that it bankrupted the country and was a major spur for the union with England in 1707. The book The Longest Walk is a true journey a man did from the tip of Patagonia to the north coast of Alaska, all on foot. He did the walk very slowly, taking 7 years. But during the walk he crossed the Darin Gap where he almost died after being chased by a tribe of indigenous locals who shot at him with arrows and spears. North Sentinel Island. Its inhabitants are one of the few, possibly one of the only peoples untouched by technology. They are also very violent and protective of their land against outsiders, attacking anyone who goes near. Local governments even decided they have jurisdiction to kill anyone who interferes with them to help preserve their pre-technology way of life. So no one goes there except at their own risk. Because of this, it's impossible to explore the island properly, and even more unfortunately, learn about their incredible culture, edit, grammar. And the only insight so far into their culture is a grave scene with what appears to be a wooden effigy of a hand reaching up to the sky. I fucking love reading about Sentinel Island. Is there a picture of that somewhere? I looked but couldn't find anything about it. It's super weird. The wiki page says the most recent thing that represents a census was a surveyor in 2011 counted 15 natives on the beach. Wikipedia webpage. They throw rocks and shoot arrows at planes and helicopters. They've actually beaten the rest of the world. Makes you wonder what kind of world they believe they exist in. One with magical sky dragons made of metal that roar constantly. Well, their population may actually be decimated by recent hurricanes. And without keeping 24/7 observation of the beach or actually journeying there, we can't even be sure there are any of them left. This was presumed, but a team went there to check on them and provide them with useful stuff and saw that they were thriving. Why not just build a few outposts in the water near the beaches, put some cameras up with good zoom and voila, we can at least observe them a little. How do they always invent the fucking bow? They and many other such tribes all around the world have been in total isolation for 50-60k years and they all come up with some variation of the bow. How? My armchair watched a lot of History Channel theory is that everyone is taking after the bendiness of trees. Like one dude is walking through the trees and walks through a tree with his buddy behind him and then thwack the tree branch flings back and hits the guy behind him. Ouch, he says. I've got an idea, says the other. Now, if you'd really watched a lot of the History Channel your theory would be aliens. So you're a pre-civilization dude who wants to hurt another living thing. You've gotten pretty fed up with just punching and grabbing and biting. You've experimented with throwing rocks at things, but you're not really getting anywhere with that. So you've taken a rock and chipped it until it can stab things. Congratulations, you invented a knife. So your knife is pretty dope. But the issue is that it can still really only hurt things that you can reach with your hands. So one day you take a long stick, cut a notch in one end, and use vines to lash your knife to the end. Your new spear lets you stab things that you would have had trouble stabbing before. Also, you can throw it. Truly a new era of stabbing has dawned. So your spear is fucking amazing. Dear birds, and other pre-civilization dudes are no match for you and your ability to throw a sharp thing pretty far. But it's still not enough. Your throwing arm is pretty good, and you've been practicing with new ways to throw the spear, but you can only make it go so far, until one day, you're trudging through the brush, just doing regular upper Paleolithic dude things, when your totally awesome spear catches on a sapling tree. Before you can react, the tree flings your spear way further than your jacked caveman arms could ever hope to. Inspired, you cut down the sapling, hack it into a smaller stave, split and wind some vines to put the whole thing under tension, and try using it to launch the spear. It works pretty well. You need to do some serious work to make the whole thing a little more cohesive, but you have invented the bow, the pinnacle of ranged stabbing technology, until some dude in China invents a crossbow. TLDR. Bows are mechanically simple, more portable than spears, more reliable than slings, and are easy to make with nothing than plants and basic tools. Obligatory silent, well-muscled Australian man for reference, YouTube webpage. I've watched preschoolers come up with versions of bows and catapults. These little kids find something bendy, figure out they can use that to launch something else, and then they start experimenting, inventing the trebuchet is harder. I saw this video on a different island that was pretty much untouched by outsiders, and I remember this white guy was there with a film crew. It was night and this local guy was supposed to be his protector and was trying to warn him about this guy that made a fire and was wearing an animal mask, talking about wanting to sacrifice the outsider. The video really creeped me out, but he survived. The Indian government swung by in a helicopter to check on them after an earthquake. They threw spears at the helicopter. What's even more interesting about them is that all of their encounters with technology like this are surely becoming part of their lore and mythology. Like how apparently metal flying machines and boats come by after every natural disaster, which would be pretty weird since usually it's myths of odd omens that predict the hurricane, not the hurricane predicting helicopters. There are many accounts of flying saucers machines in the sky before and after natural disasters in 1800s. It's really interesting to look at paintings that depicts those things. Totally. I can imagine them interpreting the large and extremely loud creatures that flew over their island as invading predators or demons that needed to be fought off, and then weaving accounts of the events into their cultural histories. I'd also be interested in their understanding of higher tech materials and items they've encountered, in some cases even adapting things like scrap metal into tools like arrowheads. They've supposedly been stripping the metal off boats that have landed on the island. We may have accidentally started their Iron Age. The other reason is for their own safety. Just breathing on them would cause an epidemic that would wipe them out. During the colonial era, the British kidnapped and took 2 adults and 2 kids from the island. The 2 adults soon died from disease, so they sent the kids back with pigs as gifts. So yeah, they are extremely vulnerable to our diseases. They are also really close to civilization. You can see street view stills from areas less than 50 kilometers away. Their biggest exposure to civilization is a ship that grounded on the island, and it's been discovered that the islanders have salvaged some of the metal. Edit, a word. That's what I posted before seeing that someone else did before me. I thought I would add something that I wanted to share. They make it very clear that they want you to gfo, like shown on one the rare pictures, ITING web page of it. I'm sure the Google mapping car will be there in the next couple months. I should hope they send a car. If they send a dude with one of those 360-degree camera backpacks, he's fucked. It's pretty interesting that the most detailed information anthropologists have about them is from how far away their javelins can reliably hit a man-sized target. Thought I'd add to this. I too love reading about North Sentinel Island. Back when the British were colonizing the world, they met with the North Sentinelese and most likely provided them with gifts. It was common strategy to be nice to locals, compliment them, put them at the center of attention etc. in order to establish trust before actually taking over when invading areas. The British took 2 women back to the mainland and they both fell ill and died. Therefore, the trust was lost and the Sentinelese became hostile. Look, this is just something I've read online and seen on YouTube videos. I'm not 100% sure it's the truth. The story according to this source, Netorama webpage, the first real threat to the natives of North Sentinel Island appeared in 1858, when the British established a penal colony at Port Blair on nearby South Andaman Island, and set out trying to pacify the local tribes, the Great Andamies, the Onge, the Jaroa, and eventually the Sentinelese. One technique the British used was to kidnap a member of an unfriendly tribe, hold him for a short period, treat him well, and then shower him with gifts and let him return to his people. In doing so, the British hoped to demonstrate their friendliness. If the first attempt didn't work, they'd repeat the process with as many tribesmen as it took to turn an unfriendly tribe into a friendly one. In 1880 a large, heavily armed party led by 20-year-old Maurice Vidal Portman, the British colonial administrator, landed on North Sentinel and made what is believed to be the first exploration of the island by outsiders. Several days passed before they made contact with any Sentinelese, because tribe members disappeared into the jungle whenever strangers approached. Finally, after several days on the island, the party stumbled across an elderly couple who were too old to run away, and several small children. Portman brought the 2 adults and 4 of the children back to Port Blair, but the man and the woman soon started to get sickened and died, probably from exposure to Western diseases like smallpox, measles, and influenza, to which they would have had little or no resistance. So Portman returned the 4 children to North Sentinel Island and released them with gifts for the rest of the tribe. The children disappeared into the jungle and were never seen again. A big part of the reason the Indian government won't let anyone go near them and has no plans to contact them is because of the concern that the North Sentinelese could easily die from exposure to everyday pathogens that the rest of the world has developed immunity resistance to. They killed 2 fishermen whose boat floated too close and they were seen scavenging the wreckage of the boat, and then a different boat was shot at with arrows with metal-tipped arrows, metal supposedly from the ship, so they may have entered the Iron Age in a weird way. Yeah, and every time a helicopter comes near they shoot arrows at it. But, if I lived in the Stone Age and a helicopter showed up I'd probably shoot it too. I bet they're actually the most technologically advanced people on the planet and they're just trolling to hide all their tech. Local governments even decided they have jurisdiction to kill anyone who interferes with them to help preserve their pre-technology way of life. The real reason it was placed off limits by the government of India, who has jurisdiction there, is because modern people carry lots of diseases that uncontacted people would not have immunity to, and a small population like that could easily get wiped out by one person bringing the flu or some other disease. We need to pay them a visit and show them what the fuck an M16 and freedom is. Stupid question, but in theory if someone were to kill a Sentinel native would they be prosecuted? I assume the normal rules of self-defense apply. So if they attack you first and you have reason to believe they'd kill you, which, with these guys, you'd easily have, it's probably fine. However, getting anywhere near them is strictly prohibited in the first place, so unless you'd have a good explanation of how you got in that situation, maybe shipwrecked and drifted there or something, I guess, you're automatically at fault. There were some fishermen who drifted towards the island a few years ago, who got killed when discovered by the islanders. It's not just prohibited, it's impossible to get to the island by sea most of the time because of currents and tide and the fact that the island is surrounded by coral reefs that would destroy most ships. You'd have to go in by helicopter, and they shoot at helicopters. The Google reviews for North Sentinel Island are hilarious. Would recommend checking them out. I have actually lived in the Andamans for a while and heard a lot about the Sentinel Islands. They are said to be cannibals and are super violent. They will throw spears and bows, not just stones, if you go near the island. My dad was a helicopter pilot in the Coast Guard and he went quite near the islands once. He told me he was never going anywhere near that island again. How do we know their culture is incredible? Kinda sounds like they might be assholes. I wish we knew their religion, because it almost certainly kicks ass. Their gods probably make the Norse gods look like pussies. Their gods are probably airplanes, which might be why they hate helicopters so much. The Strid YouTube webpage is an unassuming body of water in Bolton Abbey, Yorkshire. It looks like a quaint little stream in a quiet countryside. It's so narrow you could pretty much hop across. Don't fall in though, because there's more to it than meets the eye. Just below the surface are deep underwater caverns and churning currents. You'll be swept below and vanish underground and underwater. Your remains will never be found. Someone should drop a GPS tag in there. It should eventually come out, right? Or a small rod with however long of cable as possible. I saw a quick segment on this a little while ago where they tried a GPS tag or a small camera. I don't remember which. Either way, the current combined with the jagged rocks of the caverns completely destroyed the device. Pretty sure it also said everyone who has gone into its waters has died. 100% mortality rate. I cannot understand how we haven't thoroughly researched this. We went to the bottom of the ocean and the moon, and you're telling me we can't map the Strait? I get that there are currents and etc. But surely we can make devices capable of withstanding the conditions down there. We put a probe on Venus for a few hours before it died and it was 900 degrees. Simply put, there were governments with money who were willing to pay to put people on the bottom of the ocean and on the moon. There were things to learn in doing that. Not so sure that applies to the Strait. I mean, we probably could if we really wanted to, but the issue is nobody gives enough of a shit to put real money behind it. From what I found on the place, 100% true that everyone that falls and dies. I watched a video on it a while back. The guy in it didn't dare even hop over or stick a hand in, but instead stood safely a couple feet off to the side. If it is like Devil's Kettle Falls Futurism webpage, nothing ever comes out and the GPS wouldn't work underground. The call of the void has never been stronger than when I've been to Devil's Kettle. Fuck, I get that so bad sometimes. Why do our brains have to do that? It's haunting. People ask, why are you afraid of heights? It's not really what if I fall. It's more like what if I jump? GPS tag could hypothetically get stuck in groundwater reservoirs never to be seen again. But I agree that it would be interesting and worth the minimal effort to try. It's apparently no longer a mystery, but for a time the Devil's Kettle, Judge C. R. Magny State Park, Wikipedia webpage. Devil's Kettle was a perplexing natural phenomena, A waterfall would empty into an underground reservoir that seemingly had no bottom. Objects like ping pong balls and GPS trackers that went into it were never seen again downstream. Scientists have since concluded that the water does wind up downstream, and it's the force of the currents that pin down objects below the water until they disintegrate. They even threw a shitload of timber down it. Never seen again. Shit ton of dye as well. The Wikipedia article claims that a dye experiment was discouraged by park officials and was never conducted. Dye is pretty common in hydrogeological applications. ppm sensors with time loggers can make models for groundwater flow. Shit, that is pretty darn interesting. The false sense of security is what makes the thing such a horror. This is my nightmare. Just someplace that looks unassuming, uninteresting, and safe that turns out to be incredibly deadly in ways you can't detect. There's a tree by a highway outside Hot Springs, Arkansas, with what looks like a large puddle at its base. It's actually an opening to the thermal spring system that goes underneath the whole area, and investigators have never found the bottom. There's a fence and signs all around that tree, but sometimes deer break through and occasionally fall in. Edit. I just talked to my mom. She says it's actually on a farm in Mountain Valley, AR, which is a township about 20 minutes from Hot Springs. Googling that didn't help because that's the name of the spring water sold from Hot Springs. All I could dig up. But next time I visit I'll see if I could find it and post pictures in our Arkansas. Maybe I'm just the overly cautious type, but maybe throw up a fence or a warning sign or something. That is terrifying. It looks a lot like a typical stream or river from where I am from. The tomb of Genghis Khan. We know it's in Mongolia and probably near the area he was born. But other than that we don't know a damn thing. For a few reasons. When he died they hid it on purpose. The people of Mongolia don't want it found. And I remember hearing somewhere that it might have been found by Russia and is in an area where they've got something like missile silos or something like that. But, oh boy, I can't even imagine what he'd have been buried with. Addition fact about Genghis burial places. He requested that when he dies and is brought to his burial place that there be a funeral parade sort of deal. So Genghis inevitably dies and they parade him to his burial spot where everyone attending the funeral parade is killed after the ceremonies because Genghis Khan wanted no one to know where he was buried besides a select few of well-trusted generals who carried out his funeral execution orders. Oddly enough, Genghis was a very great ruler and respected the people who submitted to him, but he just didn't like being told no. I vaguely remember reading about that as well. I think they killed the horses too, not just the people. And once you were part of his empire everything was cool, but the shit he did to those who weren't was pretty off the goddamn wall. Like, he invented biological warfare. He was laying siege to a city that had its back to water. When some of his boys got the Black Death, he noticed everyone who touched them got sick and died too. So he said, hey, let's use catapults and shoot these fuckers in. He did. They died. Also, when he ordered genocide, he'd have each man in the army responsible for 10 left ears. To make sure there were no duplicates, they'd have wagons stacked with ears of the dead. Like 10 years ago I went on a huge con binge. I read a few books about him and his antics. And there's a really good series about him from Dan Carlin's Hardcore History. But I'll be not revisited any of that in a while, so sorry if some of my info is vague. Bhutan's Gangkhar Pensum remains the largest mountain in the world, never summited at 7.5 kilometers at its highest elevation. 3 kilometer prominence. It'll probably remain that way unless the Bhutanese government decides it isn't sacred anymore and lifts the ban on climbing it. Many of the graves of the Chinese emperors have tombs that have been discovered but yet to be excavated due to various reasons such as funding, dangers, respect, and other reasons. Other reasons include archaeological teams not wanting to excavate until they have a foolproof method of protecting what's in the sites. Kahulawi. It's one of the Hawaiian Islands. No one lived there due to no fresh water source. During WWII, the US Army used it as a training ground and bomb range. For a long time people couldn't go there cause there were still landmines around the island. They may have been cleared out now, but there still isn't anyone who lives there. Also, Molokai had a lot of beaches with strong riptides that were very dangerous. I remember we were afraid to go to the beach when we visited. There are some other beaches like that as well on the other islands. I'd say the entire north shore of Molokai counts. Those valleys are mind-blowingly beautiful, but I've never heard of anyone hiking them. There are two good hikes in Molokai, Halawa Valley Hikes and Papiapi Bog Trail. Papiapi Bog Trail is wonderfully beautiful. Just be nice about it and please leave no trace. Believe it or not, but there are a lot of parts of Greenland that are still unexplored. However, it's not really due to fear, it's more that it's a giant sheet of ice. My favorite story is MT. Kailash, Mount. Wikipedia webpage. Kailash, in China. Conspiracy theories say that it's actually a man-made pyramid from an ancient advanced race. It's only compelling because going to the top is prohibited by the Chinese government. For many years the Victoria mining claims on Rushtabuli Mountain in British Columbia's north coast were voluntarily off-limits due to massive amounts of radiation. The claims were mined for uranium during the Second World War, some of which ended up in the Trinidad test. It was reported that for the first decade a blue-white glow could be seen emanating from the valley where the mine was located. To this day the waste piles are devoid of moisture and snow even in the dead of winter. Almost everyone who worked at the Victoria claims died around the age of 45, almost all due to cancer of some form or another. I visited the place back in 2004 with a radiation detector and was blown away by how hot the waste pile was. There are some places down the Atchafalaya Basin that no human has ever set foot on because of the 17+ foot alligators there. Seriously, I will try to find the link to the Louisiana wildlife, but there was this one that bit the front end of an airboat completely off. Someone has a picture of it carrying a whole deer in its mouth. It wasn't photoshopped. I've only ever crossed the bridge on I-10, but I'd believe just about any story about prehistoric monsters living there. That is a real deal boonies. Atchafalaya. What creeps me out are the big X's etched into the woods you can see from Google Maps satellite view. Probably a reasonable explanation, but Louisiana voodoo creeps me out. I checked Google Maps and now I need to know why there are random X's etched into the woods there. You can somniacute in Austinford. If you zoom in you'll notice in the center of each X there's a hunting tower casting its shadow. So the very mundane explanation is those are artificial clearings to make shooting stuff easier. Now, for your own sanity let's assume this stuff is only animals. I grew up around there and it was pretty much a general rule that you don't go in the heart of the basin. If you're not from the area there's a wildlife refuge on the northern end. And to the south there's a book of marshland that connects a book of bayous and lakes out there. The general space between I-10, south of it, and US 90 is the area in question. While there are a lot of small towns and even villages on the skirts of the basin, no one really ventures too deep into it. Even families that have been there since their ancestors settled there hundreds of years ago refuse to go too deep in there because it's just a massive tangle of thick woods, marshland, and untapped wildlife that can seriously fuck you up. All of that on top of the fact that it's basically just a huge reservoir for overflow from the Mississippi River makes it especially dangerous during the spring and summer. There's also the legends of the Raugarau, which depending on who you ask is akin to a werewolf, or Bigfoot, or just some other garden variety cryptid, but most folks aren't afraid of the basin for that. But because they all know the real dangers of getting caught in there, shifting tides can leave you stranded in parts for hours, if not days. And like I mentioned, a lot of documented and real wildlife is present in the area, like alligators, wild hogs, bears, and even large cats. To top it all off, there's also the legend of Jean Lafitte, who lost a ship full of treasure deep within the basin while trying to outrun the Navy, who ambushed his hideout in Barisha Bay. And we've all heard stories down here of unexpected explorers going treasure hunting never to be seen again. But it's really no joke. In this day I wouldn't say it's completely unexplored, but it's definitely a place where few people dare to go because A, there's no major need to do so, and B, it's not worth the risk. Morgan Island, aka Monkey Island, a 4,500 acre island off the coast of Beaufort, SC, south of Charleston, is off limits due to a colony of monkeys living there who are infected with herpes B. 1,400 of them, research animals, were relocated there in 1979 and have apparently thrived. Looking at Google Earth, there are docks with boats parked at them on the island. Is it off limits to all people or just normal civilians? The Pine Barrens in New Jersey. Creepy shit, creepy folklore. Jersey Devil's Own. KKK meeting ground. Dead body disposal site for the mafia. Ghost girl in random pond. Many other bizarre things there. All I ever saw was a clan meeting and some very creepy satanic cult stuff in an abandoned house out there. Books and Weird NJ have articles and such on the place. Really interesting TBH. Also in 2001 a Russian hitman and interior decorator went missing in the Pine Barrens and has never been found to this day. That's a hell of a resume. Duh, we make your living room bright and welcoming, and then I kill your rivals. Wait, you personally saw a clan meeting and the satanic stuff? Hell, I wouldn't have even gone into the Barrens in the first place. There's a room at KKK Boulevard about 30 minutes from where I live in the Barrens that apparently leads to the spot they have their meetings. But I'm gonna pass on trying to find it, lol. I drove past a cross burning in the middle of Tennessee after getting lost coming back from a baseball tournament when I was a teenager. I can only assume it was a clan meeting. I'm from the Pine Barrens and they're awesome to explore and go off-road during the day, but at night fuck number. I know someone who supposedly saw the Jersey Devil when they got stuck out there at night. Along with the other things I've heard, I don't try and find out, lol. What makes the Pine Barrens so creepy? There's no other woods in the US people are so scared of. Considering the geography, it's a kind of strange. Located on East Coast, it's a relatively empty forest located near some of the most populous cities in the US. New York, Philly, DC. It's barren, so not many crops grow. It's densely packed with flora. It has creepy folklore dating back to the colonial era. Why, I think so at least. There is a wildlife park where the erosion happens both vertically and horizontally, resulting in a maze of rocky canyons where every arc is razor sharp. Researchers sometimes go in there, but even taking a brief knee from stumbling can wind up getting you several inches of rock spike embedded into your kneecap. Edit. It's Tsingy. The Nahanni Valley in western Canada, called the Headless Valley, in particular a place called the 200 Mile Gorge, The natives that lived there didn't like outsiders. The other natives feared them and they had a penchant for decapitating victims and supposedly just vanished. The region is still largely unexplored because it is extremely remote, and if legends are to believed, cursed place has it all. Native ghost warriors, Bigfoot sightings, aliens, caves full of ancient dead goats, and prehistoric animals. New York's hottest club is the Nahanni Valley. This place has everything. Bigfoot sightings, UFOs, caves full of ancient goat corpses, and native ghost warriors. It's that thing where a vengeful spirit decapitates you for stepping foot on his burial ground. There's this island close to India. Just kidding. La Cueva de los Teos, a cave system in Ecuador that has been explored before, but not fully due to religious reasons, superstitions from the Aboriginals, and because the Ecuadorian government for some reason has it practically off limits to anyone, instead giving permission to explore a smaller cave system that is connected to the former, but it is not the real one. Different artifacts have been found, but a special one stands out of a human eagle form, most likely a god, that is for all intents and purposes exactly the same as another one that is found on ancient Mesopotamia, if I'm remembering correctly. Weird considering that ancient cultures didn't have any sort of contact with each other. That, plus golden scripts, the normal Indiana Jones stuff. Oh, and Neil Armstrong was once there as part of one of the expeditions in the 70s. I've read about this one. I don't remember everything exactly, but the cave is supposed to have been the grave of a king or noble. A guy who explored it in the past talked about books made of metal and walls that looked like were carved by humans. The Ecuadorian government doesn't allow people in because the cave has religious importance for a local tribe that got angry about previous explorers being disrespectful towards the cave. This tribe is also said to have lied about the true entrance, guiding recent explorers to a different cave which has nothing interesting just to end people's interest in it. Hey, this is a pretty good one. I need to hear more about this human eagle thing. I'd imagine many parts of the Amazon are unexplored and there's a fear of uncontacted people who live there. Also, there are diseases that don't have cures. I read about a small island that whenever boats or the planes that land on water get near they throw spears and rocks at them. That too. And I think you're thinking about North Sentinel Island, which is in the Indian Ocean. When a tribe is contacted, they go from masters of their own destiny, to the poorest people on earth. The Mississippi is big, deep, and very muddy. There are loads of dams that need maintenance, but lots of divers won't do the job. There is the hazard of being sucked into the hydroelectric dam. But another reason given is that they are scared of the catfish. The fish just need to sit there and the food goes to them and they can get huge. Sure, the Mississippi is explored, but verifying if those catfish are even there or not is next to impossible. Back in the 70s, my dad's cousin was a diver for the local sheriff's department. One day, a car went off the dam into the deep side of lake. The divers went down and when they came up, a bunch of the guys refused to go back down. They claimed that they had seen catfish the size of a VW bug and perch the size of motorcycles. Now I had always thought that these stories were exaggerated, and maybe a bit they are. But after the invention of YouTube and seeing river monsters, I have found it's not as far-fetched. Edit. Words. There's a spring in Illinois called Mammoth Springs that is a popular scuba diving spot and I've seen spoon-billed catfish the size of motorcycles down there before. It's honestly amazing, especially when you're diving in the water with them. They're pretty harmless though, just really fucking big. Harmless or not, I would still be pretty nervous knowing that I'm swimming next to something that could swallow me whole. And that is just in lakes and rivers. Could you imagine the things in the deep ocean we haven't even discovered yet? All I needed was to watch river monsters a couple times to know that catfish can get gigantic. The Welsh catfish Jeremy Wade caught was 7 feet long. No thanks. I live in the NJ Pine Barrens. There are a lot of spots people have never been or haven't been for centuries. It's half rational and half irrational. The spots in the woods are so overgrown and untouched that there are places you could never walk through between trails, and it would be a serious pain in the ass to excavate. The other problem is that all these areas are haunted or the Jersey Devil goes through, according to locals. The real actual problem is that the Pine Barrens of NJ are like a desert swamp. The roots go way down through the sand and the parts above ground are way overgrown and full of all the wildlife that used to be here. Most people in South Jersey are only used to squirrels and deers, and that's it. Some roaming Bedouin tribes in the Sahara Desert in Egypt and the Sudan are rumored to accept demons in their society and are practices of black magic. This was a big topic of interest in the 80s, and many journalists tried to get interviews. Some went missing in those that are allegedly found them said they saw people with animal legs and other weird stuff and barely avoided capture, deciding it wasn't worth the fame. Edit. Yeah, jinn can be good or bad, but the good kind aren't interested in humans. I heard about this from relatives talking about stuff that PPL don't usually talk about. I don't have any more info, but good luck. PPL over here take the concept of taboo very seriously, and this is one of those things. Mount Kailash, China, Tibet. It is a 6,600 m peak in the Chinese part of Himalayas near Mansarovar Lake. Kailash is another name for Lord Shiva. The mountain is considered sacred by both the Hindu as well as Buddhist communities, and as a result, the Chinese government has banned anyone from scaling it. One mountaineer did get a permit but had to withdraw due to the public backlash. In the past, the people who had tried to scale it accounted for it being very difficult. The locals believe that Lord Shiva resides there, and there have been many other theories related to it. One of them being that it is actually a pyramid which is connected to others like the Great Pyramid via a network of underground tunnels. And as a result, till date, it remains a peak yet unscaled. Mount Kailash, Wikipedia webpage. This reminds me of the shamaness Queen Himiko of the Yamatekoku Kingdom. Tomb Raider fans will immediately know what I am talking about. Dating back to Nahanni 250 AD. Japanese archaeologists and scholars have debated where her kingdom and more importantly her burial grounds were located. In the recent decades there's been huge speculation about her burial site being within one of the early Hashihaka coffins. Key-shaped burial site, in Sakarinara, Kansai region. Apparently carbon dating of different artifacts around the site dates back to around 250 AD, but the Imperial Household Agency absolutely will not allow for excavation of something this important in history in order to preserve. So we may never know if Queen Himiko's tomb is actually within that particular coffin burial mound. Fun fact: one of the largest graves in the world by area, Wikipedia webpage, is held by Emperor Nantoku, within the coffin era, during the mid-5th century. There's a strange black forest in Bhutan associated with an ancient death spirit. It predates Buddhism spread to the country. The locals are so serious about they built the highway for the area around whole forest on the other side of the mountain. One of the world's tallest mountains still has never been climbed because of religious reasons. Not sure if it's fear, but it's fascinating to think that there's still a first summit left out there. Huska Castle. The legends about that place are terrifying, but very few have tried to explore the gateway to hell. Crap ton of caves. You've likely heard by now about the Thai boys who are trapped in a cave. I totally hope they'll be rescued, but I know of not one, but two cases of cavers dying in caves in positions that ensured that they could not be removed from the cave, and their bodies inhabit those caves today. Just Google trapped upside down cave. You'll get the American first, and I believe his case was more recent, but it happened in the United Kingdom as well. Basically there are caves you can walk into and they are explored and mapped and whatnot, but then someone finds a passage that isn't on the map, so curiosity takes over, and next thing they know they're in a passageway just big enough for them, and they think it'll open up and they can turn around, but then they get stuck and can't get back out and then it's game over. So these passageways tend to get sealed off, if not the entire cave. Cavers will tell you that statistically, caving is a safe sport, and they are technically right. Caving fatalities are far lower than many other sports. The ones that do happen though, tend to be freak accidents that scare off potential and wannabe cavers, though. According to the last episode of Anthony Bourdain's Parts Unknown, there is a forested region of Bhutan that is not developed or even entered by the locals because it is said to inhabit evil spirits. That's about all I know. Just figured I'd share it. I found the fact that there is no roads, infrastructure, or human inhabitants in that area interesting. Even if Bhutanese people lose cattle that wander into that area, they apparently won't go after them. Northeastern Manitoba. It's not so much out of fear but isolation. There are 2 rail lines that run into it. You need special grants to be able to go there and it's really restricted, as in only government employed rangers can get the permits to go. You know, if the rail lines haven't broken down, can't remember the park's name. The Poveglia Island in Italy is off limits for public access. This is due to the horrors that had occurred at the island. It was a site of wars. Plague victims were dumped there, and it was once used as an armory for weapons. The island is believed to be severely haunted and dangerous. Edit. Oh yeah, there was also a mental asylum built there. That and the Italian government sold it in auction to a private entity 4 years ago. In the Congo jungle there's a lot of unexplored area and some say there are still living pygmy dinosaurs living there. In the area around Kenora, Ontario, roughly 2 hours east of Winnipeg, there have been reports of a Wendigo spirit loose for at least 150 years. On a nearby island called Tunnel Island there is a white pine aged to be roughly 300 years old. The Wendigo is said to live in the tree. There is even a sign stating the history, and warning any visitors to touch the tree at their own risk. It's called the Treasure Tree, and it's hardly feared. It's practically a tourist attraction. There are actually a ton of places that are unexplored and not very populated. Siberia, New Guinea, Patagonia, which is basically a big iceberg. One of my favorite is the world's largest cave in Vietnam. The surrounding cave systems also have never been surveyed. Satellites and drones can't do it either. It's so big it has its own river, jungle and ecosystem. Hang Sundin was discovered less than 10 years ago and only 500 visitors per year are allowed in. Plum Island NY, Wikipedia webpage, was apparently a site for testing biological weapons on animals. It's owned by government so no one is allowed to go there. The CDC's research lab on Plum Island is being moved to Manhattan, KS, FWIW. They researched Lyme, anthrax, and Ebola there. Tetapa Island, Tetapa webpage, in Western Province, Solomon Islands. Around 1860 the people of Tetapa abandoned their island home in a mass exodus. There are 3 potential causes of this: disease, headhunting pressure and or sea devil magic that possibly led to a great famine. Beach or sea devil magic may have contributed to the exodus of Tetipa. Originally, the spirits protected the people and were hostile only to their foes. Due to disrespect or casting off a curse by another tribe, their favors were turned and an Olwal curse was cast on the inhabitants of the island. The coming of the headhunters was not forewarned and protection from disease was not granted. It is said that entry to the island is still greatly restricted not by human imposition but by supernatural works. I stayed there for a couple nights and I haven't been turned into a newt or anything. FWIW. 2 Guns. AZ has been partially explored but never fully. It's the home of the Apache Death Cave and is generally an unsettling place to see. Multiple, now ghost, towns were built upon the burial ground and the land is for sale as of right now. It's pretty interesting and I encourage anyone interested to give it a Google. Creepy stuff. The last door of Padmanabhaswamy would qualify previously, except the Travancore royal family is reported to be plundering it for his own private gain now. Colombia has a lot of unexplored mountains and jungles, which makes them perfect for guerrilla fighters and drug cartels to hide operate in and also dangerous to explore. Right here in our own backyard NorCal we have MT. Canocti, a dormant volcano. The surface of the mountain itself is well explored, but it is said to be full of caves. Allegedly the entrances were dynamited decades ago to keep kids from wandering in and getting killed. Part of the lore is that the cave complex connects to adjacent Clear Lake, and that the native Pomo tribe explored this area once during a drought that lowered the lake sufficiently. Divers have never found it, and it may also be a thermal feature that's too hot to explore. I like the way you say our backyard as if everyone reading this comment is in the same place as you. The Strid is a terrifying river in Yorkshire. The reason it's so scary is because it looks so calm yet opens up to huge churning caverns of water where the riverbed should be. Sri Padmanabhaswamy Temple in India. The locals can't enter because of their religious beliefs, but it supposedly holds a massive fortune in relics and artifacts. Ironic since the area around it is super poor. Bertar Wheel. It's a desert area between Sudan and Egypt, claimed by neither country. Thank you, OP. I'm going to be up late tonight and this will make mighty fine reading. Head Island, located in the southern Indian Ocean, 1,600 miles off the coast of Antarctica, covered in snow and glaciers with a 2,745-n volcano dubbed Big Ben at the center. It is under Australian jurisdiction and has been dubbed a marine reserve and one has to receive expressed permission to visit, mainly only research missions. It is one of the last reaches of the world untouched by human activity, and a great place to see Mother Nature at its finest. Many underground catacombs in Paris are still unexplored and the few that try to explore disappear. Source: none. I just guess they're unexplored but people do really disappear. Would someone be so kind to confirm something of this? Shout out to that girl who was drunk from a party that was happening in the Odessa catacombs. Who would do that in the first place, and was separated from the group and was found sometime later, dead. Read further here. Explorers make gruesome discovery inside Odessa catacombs webpage. It's kinda spooky that there's a picture of the body, just laying there decomposed. My first panic attack happened in the Paris catacomb. It has been my lifelong dream to go, but then I got down there and was filled with complete dread. It was awful cause you have to go through to get out. There are regions in India's Andaman and Nicobar Islands that are inhabited by tribes that are hostile to outsiders. The government doesn't want to disturb them, so those regions are quite unexplored. I've driven through the island and it is really cool. There is only one highway with checkpoints every couple kilometers where they take down the plate of your car and visa information. I enjoy how a majority of these answers say something like humans are not allowed to go there, and then you can go onto YouTube and find a detailed documentary on said place. Monkey Islands, Snake Islands, certain caves or underwater caves. But remember, humans are forbidden. Well, you're not allowed. Nothing saying experienced researchers aren't. There are lots of underground caves and caverns that are yet to be explored. Mount Kailash of the Himalayas. Locals, whole India, believe that it's the home of Lord Shiva. Government has banned any trekking in this region. North Sentinel Island. It is a small island near India with a population of around 40 people. We've made contact once in 1780 when a British ship crashed there. The locals attacked that ship and killed a bunch of the people and scarred off everyone else. When we tried to re-establish contact in 1980 via helicopter, they launched arrows at it. Some say that there is some kind of secret there, and yet I don't think there's some kind of secret there, other than the fascinating mystery of what the Sentinelese culture is like. There's just the people living there who don't want to be disturbed. I wonder if they ever have arguments where some of the inhabitants are curious what would happen if they let outsiders explore the island. There's probably a lot of mythology with us being literal aliens against them due to the fact to them they're metal floating in the fucking sky and a bunch of people came on a mechanized boat holding boxes of metal at them cameras. I wonder if they'll ever build boats and try to leave. How blown their minds would be if they could see an average sized modern city. They've recently reached the Iron Age. There's a shipwreck on the northwestern coast of the island that they have been salvaging metal from. God, it's like in Civ when a barbarian race gets stuck on an island and finally reaches your nuclear age city in a wooden boat with spears. That's not the Iron Age unless they are forging it itself. I always thought this was a tragedy, letting them be. Wouldn't it almost be more of a tragedy to forcefully bootstrap their culture into the modern era? It could quite possibly destroy any trace of their original culture since the gap is so wide, and this way we can, from a distance, study their own technological cultural evolution, or at least have a living example of massively pre-industrial society. Unless you meant it's a tragedy that we have quite possibly already inadvertently affected their cultural technological development, in which case I agree. Someone said earlier in the thread that they actually have been contacted since then, and are quite friendly. Trust me, they aren't friendly at all. After a tsunami 10 years ago, a government helicopter flew over them to see if they survived, only to be met with a barrage of spears. North Sentinel Island webpage. They have been contacted and shown signs of friendliness. This just popped up with a quick Google search though, so they may have been contacted more. Only once. Then they once again turn hostile and actively, often violently, rejecting contact without a word. The government of India even declared they wouldn't meddle with the tribe, effectively giving them independence and freedom, even when that means killing those who go near these tribesmen. The true depths of the ocean. The pressure is so immense that we can't build anything that could withstand it for enough time to get data. Also maybe see monsters. When I went to Australia last year, I was actually told that there is a rainforest that is closed off by boulders piled to cover the rainforest. The only way to get there is by helicopter, and the crazy thing is that a couple of years ago 3 or 4 new species of animals were discovered. I don't know why it's closed off, but the rainforest is called Cape Melville, comment why you think it is closed off. The boulders are part of the big ass mountain, I thought, and the boulders were much taller than the team anticipated, so they had to have the helicopter find a different spot to drop them off. But you can go camping in the park part. The lost city of Paititi, Wikipedia webpage, is said to be in a rectangular-shaped area found on Google Earth at the summit of the mountain near Cusco, but the natives are afraid to go there. I can't find a source for the story about why they haven't made it. You can go to Antarctica. It is kind of expensive but not off limits or anything.